This Weber repair video is all about replacing the Cookbox on the Genesis family of grills. We're working on the 330 model for this video, but the same procedures apply for all Genesis grills. Start by shutting off the gas supply to the grill, and if you're working on a propane model, remove the tank. Remove the cotter pins and hinge pins from the back of the lid, then lift the lid straight off and set it aside. Be sure not to put the lid upside down because you could scratch the top. Put the hinge pins and cotter pins back in the old Cookbox so you'll know where they are when it comes time for reassembly. Now, if you're changing the Cookbox, you're probably working on a pretty high mileage grill. So set aside the cooking grates and the flavorizer bars in a place where they won't make a mess. Take the time to clean out the ash and debris from the old Cookbox, and you'll stay cleaner and be able to do a neater job. Although you've been called in to deal with a Cookbox issue, be sure to inspect the burner tubes while you're working. If corrosion has caused any damage, you'll need to let the grill owner know that the tubes need replacing. Now's the time to remove the control panel, and you need to start by pulling off the knobs. They're a friction fit, and they just come straight off the front. Open the grill doors to gain access to the two machine screws that secure the control panel. There's one screw at each end of the panel. Unclip the control panel by lifting it straight up, then pull it forward and rest it on the top edge of the partially open doors. Unplug the color-coded igniter wires, then set the control panel aside in a safe place. Now's the time to remove the manifold assembly. So loosen and remove the two small bolts, one on each end. The manifold assembly is also connected to the grill by two gas lines. Use wrenches to loosen the fittings on these lines, then unthread them completely by hand. There's only one other thing that's connecting the manifold assembly to the grill, and that's the ignition electrodes. Use your thumb to push each electrode out from the grooves in the burner tube, then carefully lift the tubes up and out of the way. Now you're free to pull the entire manifold assembly and igniter wiring away from the grill and set it aside someplace safe. With the burner tubes out of the way, remove the heat deflectors, then slide the grease tray out from underneath the Cookbox. There's a bracket that anchors the gas lines to the bottom of the Cookbox, and now's the time to take that off. At this stage, there are only two more things holding the old Cookbox in place. You'll find a shouldered bolt at each end of the Cookbox that threads into a nut held within a groove in the box itself. If you've got some tape handy, do yourself a favor and tape over the nuts to hold them in that groove while you loosen the shouldered bolts. The heads of the bolts are found underneath the side table, right here. The bolt underneath the left-hand table is easy to get at and loosen with a socket wrench and an extension. If the grill you're working on has a side burner, it's a little trickier to get at the bolt on the right-hand side of the grill. A closed-end ratcheting wrench like this one makes the job a whole lot easier because you can slip into the small space and get that wrench on the head of the bolt. Remove the tape and nuts from inside the old Cookbox, then simply lift it up and set it to one side. The Cookbox is made of aluminum, so no matter what shape it's in, it's a valuable resource for local recycling programs. There are two things you need to transfer from the old Cookbox to the new one. One is a heat shield that fits inside the Cookbox towards the left-hand side when viewed from the front. The other things to transfer are the two stainless steel tracks that the grease tray slides on. You'll find a nut driver, the easiest way to remove the small machine screws, then reinstall the tracks on the underside of the new Cookbox. Set it in place in the grill frame, then reinstall the shouldered bolts, one at each end of the Cookbox. Set the nuts in place, then hold them there with your finger as you tighten up the bolts. If you're working on a grill with a side burner, tighten the bolt on the right-hand side first. That'll create room for you to slide your ratcheting wrench out of the way. Finish up by tightening the bolt on the left side of the Cookbox. From here on in, it's just a matter of putting everything back the way you found it. So slide the grease tray in place, then set the heat deflectors into position in the bottom of the Cookbox. As you probably noticed in the old Cookbox, the far end of the burner tubes are secured with small machine screws that thread into holes. Don't reuse the old screws because they may have started to corrode. Instead, use fresh ones. The Cookbox is designed so that you can drive the burner anchoring screws all the way in tight and still slip the end of the burner tubes in place after the fact. Drive fresh machine screws into all positions in the Cookbox, then take a look at the old burner tubes. If there's any sign of deterioration, use fresh burner tubes for best grilling performance. Push each tube into position one at a time, and be sure to slip the notch in the end of the tube underneath the head of the machine screws you just installed. Now it's time to replace the manifold assembly in the reverse order that you took it off previously. Push the igniter electrodes one at a time into the channels in the burner tubes, and be sure to push them all the way forward so they click into position. Guide the ends of the valves into the holes in the burner tubes, then secure the manifold assembly with the 2 machine screws, one on each end. Reconnect the gas lines to the manifold, being sure to route the igniter wire underneath the gas lines, not on top. You'll need to leak test these gas line fittings in a minute, but for now, take up all the slack in the igniter wires and make sure they're all clipped properly into their holders. If any of the wire clips are broken or melted, now's the time to replace them. Re-secure the bracket that holds the gas lines to the underside of the Cookbox, then get ready to leak test the gas fittings. Replace the tank if you're working on a propane model, then turn on the gas and spritz on a soap and water solution to look for bubbles that indicate leaks. Do this procedure on all gas fittings on the grill. Set the control panel in place on the top edge of the partially open doors, then reconnect the color-coded wires to the igniter module. Clip the control panel in position, but don't secure the screws in the bottom just yet. Instead, push the knobs in place, then test and see that each burner ignites and burns properly. A bright blue flame should appear as soon as the igniter button is pushed and held and the gas valve turned on. While you're at it, check the operation of the side burner if the grill you're working on has one. If everything looks good, secure the control panel with the small machine screws, one at each end. Then replace the flavorizer bars and the cooking grates. Set the lid back in place, then reinstall the hinge pins and cotter pins and test the operation of the lid. As a Weber repair technician, your job is to bring each grill back to factory performance, but you should also leave each grill looking better than it did when you got there. Please use non-abrasive grill wipes to clean up before you hand the grill over to the owner. Thank you very much for taking the time to learn how to repair the Genesis family of grills properly. You're a valuable part of the Weber team.